Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Body Image and Self-Esteem. Now, I would like to introduce Craig Lindsay, who is a Senior Manager of Programs and Public Policy at the Kidney Foundation's Ontario branch, to start us off.
Good morning, everyone. As Sadia indicated, I'm Craig. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs and Public Policy here at the Ontario branch of the Kidney Foundation. Welcome to Body Image and Self-Esteem. Today, we have 5 amazing patient partners sharing their thoughts, feelings, and providing tips and support to everyone watching from their different lenses of the kidney journey. We're very honored that they have chosen the Kidney Foundation to share their journey when it comes to things like hair loss, weight gain and loss, stretch marks, and to chat a little bit about what it's like as a kidney patient to date, or even tell your peers about what you're going through. Lots to hear, lots to learn from their experiences and personal kidney journeys. The Kidney Foundation would like to thank our sponsors for this 2022 webinar series: GSK Canada, Horizon, Otsuka, Paladin, and Takeda. This webinar will bring together patients and healthcare professionals to have a broader dialogue about empowering positive body image through the following topics: stretch marks, hair and weight changes, from medications, treatments, dialysis accesses, and dating with CKD, and more. Before we would begin, we would like to recognize the Indigenous land that we are on. Inspired by the 94 recommended calls to action made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, land acknowledgements are a necessary first step toward honoring the original occupants of a place. They also help Canadians to recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' inherent kinship beliefs when it comes to the land, especially since those beliefs were restricted for so long. I encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on that and to acknowledge it. If you know the territory in which you're situated, I invite you to acknowledge it in the chat. For my part, I would like to acknowledge that I'm located in Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and is still home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and the future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples across the country. The information shared today is current as of June 28, 2022. The material shared in this presentation is not intended to be medical advice. You should always speak to your doctor and your care team about your own individual situation. This information is intended for a Canadian audience.
Les informations partagées dans ce webinaire sont à jour en date d'aujourd'hui, le 28 juin 2022. Le matériel partagé dans cette présentation n'est pas destiné à remplacer un avis médical. Vous devriez parler à votre médecin de votre situation individuelle. Cette information est destinée à un public canadien.
We are thrilled to introduce our speakers today. Thank you all for making time to share this important information. I would now like to introduce you back to our moderator for this webinar, Sadia Beg, Programs Coordinator in the Ontario branch. Sadia?
Thank you, Craig, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this really important topic. Today's goal for this webinar is to continue addressing the topic in a more open concept when it comes to our body image and what we go through within our kidney journey as individuals and in so many unique different ways. We struggle as peers with our bodies, and we knowing that you are not alone when it comes to this journey with the stretch marks, with the hair loss. It makes it a lot easier to understand, to cope, and to even talk about it with your healthcare professionals. And as a patient myself, I've gone through all the struggles, and I can relate to all of our patient partners today who are joining us from their different knowledge, their different experiences, and their struggles when it comes to all of this. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Charlene was born with chronic kidney disease and other complex medical conditions. She has gone through many surgeries, including a kidney transplant last year. Despite the tremendous challenges, Charlene keeps a positive attitude and continuously works out to bring the best of her future. So thank you, Charlene, for being here today.
Hi.
Next we have is Louise. Louise was diagnosed in June 2020 with CKD. To say that she was stunned with the diagnosis is an understatement. Louise has faced challenges with her weight throughout her kidney journey. Her nephrologist decided not to start dialysis, but send her home with a few sheets of paper for a new diet. At that point of her journey, she had already lost 35 pounds, which empowered her to review her eating habits, and she tried to eat healthier. Louise continued to lose weight, but it hit a plateau at 80 pounds weight loss. She jokes that she currently weighs less than she did when she got divorced in 1991. Louise continues to exercise more, making wiser decisions when eating out, but also saying it's okay to enjoy a burger, fries, or even a piece of chocolate in moderation, of course. She is giving herself permission to enjoy life. Hi, Louise.
Hi, thank you.
Next we have is Mason. He is a high school math teacher. He has faced adversity throughout the majority of his adult life, starting at 18 with vision loss and then being diagnosed with end-stage renal failure in March of 2020 with COVID closures and isolation. He is often praised for his resilience and positivity. Hi, Mason. Next we have is Salvatore. He started his kidney journey when he was 14 years old with hemodialysis. He received his first kidney transplant in 1984 that thrived for 36 years. Salvatore has been a home dialysis patient for the past 3 years and is currently waiting for his second kidney transplant, hopefully any day now. Thanks, Salvatore.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Wendy. Wendy lives with kidney disease and lupus. She was diagnosed in 2009 when she was 26 years old. As a young adult, learning that she had kidney disease was somewhat hard for her at first, as it would be for anyone. Not knowing much about KD, Wendy's first thought was, am I going to die? She did her research and ultimately felt better about what she found. Many individuals live for years with CKD. 3 weeks later, she was told that due to her KD, she subsequently had lupus. Wendy then realized that she was beginning her lifelong journey. Wendy recently lives with the kidney transplant. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
So now what we're going to do is continue on with our fireside chat. And I have a few questions that we're going to approach to our panelists. So again, we do have an amazing and diverse group of folks here today. And let's just jump right in. So my first question is for Charlene, but again, everyone chime in and let's hear your thoughts. How have you coped with having to carry visible medical items, such as a urine bag, blood pressure monitor, for medical tests while attending school?
I think at first, as with any changes in the kidney journey, it takes a while to accept and to realize the impact it has on how I viewed myself, especially with, let's say, a urine bag going to school. I'm always way more self-conscious of how I appear to my peers, of how I act, of how many times I go to the washroom a day, or if they can see the urine bag and if they will think different of me if they see it. And what has really helped me cope with this is actually just my family support in this, their empathy and understanding of what I'm going through, that this is a hard time, that especially I like to bring as an example my mom. She was very understanding and empathetic and always took the time to really give me space to tell her my frustrations and also help me through it. For example, picking out my outfits for a school day. It might seem like very small, but to me it's like it helped me really to feel more comfortable in myself and gave me the confidence to go to school, let's say with a urine bag, or on some days maybe a blood pressure monitor, and feel like, hey, it's actually not that bad and I can go through this day.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Amazing points. Go ahead, Mason.
I kind of went through not the similar thing because of going to school. I didn't end up having the kidney failure until after. And I don't know if any other participants or people watching, I've never even heard of anybody needing a urine bag. So I know you must do a really good job of hiding it, because I've never seen any other patients with it. So I don't think it really shows all that well. I think it might be a lot of things that we're very considerate and like self-conscious of ourselves, right? I was self-conscious, however, of the blood pressure. So I have like the little blood pressure monitor at home and I keep it in my living room. And so if I would have friends over or anything, then it's, well, I don't want that sitting out, right? But I've now, after 2 years, kind of gotten accustomed to it. And that's just a part of my living room. It's kind of just there, right? The same way that you have a TV or you have speakers, I just have a blood pressure monitor. Some friends come over and they even want to use it to see, oh, well, what is that, right? They've never used one before. They've never seen it at a home setting before.
And Charlene, to go back to what you said, like, did any of your friends ask you questions about the pouch or even your blood pressure monitor? Or like, how did you kind of tackle that from that aspect?
Yeah, I think to clarify, it was just like a period of time.
Okay.
It was like a multiple day test to see how I was doing during this time, or if I actually needed the urine bag for the rest of my life. And in terms of my friends, a lot of them actually did not notice it, which was pretty surprising. And if they did, they were very, very thoughtful. And sometimes they'd be like, "Are you okay? Do you need me for anything?" Like, or if they're curious, they may ask, "Oh, what is this for?" But they're always very thoughtful. And I think them just saying, "I'm here for you if you need me," was just a really, really great support. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, Charlene, I resonate with what you're saying. Back in 2013, I went to school and that was when I went into remission. So the school that I went to, they had a first aid like office. So when I was on PD, I had to do it all during the day parts. So what I had to do was I went into the first aid room and spoke to the nurse there, and I gave her a rundown about, my disease and what it entailed. So every day at lunchtime, what I had to do was I had to carry my PD bags with me, put them in my locker, and then bring them down to the first aid room and then do my dialysis there for about 20 minutes and then go have lunch with my friends and then go back to school. So eventually I actually ended up telling my friends at school so that they didn't wonder, oh, where did Wendy go for 20 to half an hour minutes? So eventually I realized that telling my friends and letting them know what I was going through kind of helped me in a way because they were supportive and they always made sure that like if I ate my lunch first and did my dialysis after, they always made sure, oh, Wendy, don't forget to go and do your dialysis because we don't want you to be ill or anything like that. So, I understand what you went through.
Question for you. Would they be able to go and join you while you were doing your dialysis? I don't know what PD is like, but I thought that might be something that would be possible for you, or no?
No, they probably could have, but it was something that I just wanted to do by myself. You always had to make sure that you were in a sanitary area. So having other people around wouldn't have been really effective because they might like cough or, do something and, contaminate the area. So yeah.
But even for dialysis, it's you can have your friends and your support systems. And to go back to Charlene's point, having someone like her mom and our other caregivers and our other, support networks, it makes it a lot easier because those people are there to support you through the journey, through the process, and make you feel more comfortable in your own skin when it comes to the kidney journey. So that's great that you had your mom, Charlene. Anyone else wanted to add to how they coped with any kind of medical items to take with them. I know I had at one point the blood pressure monitor where I had to hide it because back in the day, it was like this big contraption and you had to just put it over your shoulder and wear it and hide it under your jacket. So I know I had to do that a few times when I was in school, and I got a few looks and questions like, what is this big clunky thing? But I think I know for me, it was just educating myself and then educating those around me. So they knew it was something that was normal in my lifestyle when it came to the kidney journey, and that it was to keep me healthy and to make sure that I was okay at the end of the day.
So one other thing that I wanted to comment so far in all the stories we've all touched on, and I think it's something that really affects everyone going through kidney failure, and that's the support network, right? So unfortunately, I got hit with COVID exactly at March 2020, just as we shut down. And a lot of my friends kind of all disappeared. No one was really there to help support me, and I live alone. And so I kind of went into paranoia, kind of living under a rock, living in my apartment. I would go 3 months at a time without seeing anybody. And so I didn't have that support network for roughly about 2 years going through the start. And so it was a huge, huge difference of finally reaching out to the peer support network here with the Kidney Foundation, as well as online groups and things like that I would join. And so just having people to talk to, having people to kind of tell your own story to, or to hear their stories, to know that you're not alone in what you're going through, that other people can potentially go through worse situations than what you are, so that you can stay positive in that aspect, or people who can just be there for you to answer the questions. A lot of times doctors and nurses, they don't always tell you the real life what you're going to be going through. They just tell you the medical side, right? So it's important to have the social emotional side as well. That's not just coming from a social worker where they kind of just nod along and how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How does that make you feel? But actually just having a real conversation like we're doing now.
I totally agree with you, Mason. I was also diagnosed at the beginning of COVID, and that's one of the reasons why I never went to see my doctor, when I first got sick, because after all, there were sick people there at the doctor's office, right? And I wasn't sick, I just wasn't feeling well. Then I ended up in the hospital, and all of a sudden it was a lot more serious than I thought. But, I reached out to the Kidney Foundation and found the peer support groups and talked to a ton of people there, and I just got all the love and support that you needed from all these other people, who've gone through the same thing as you. So yeah, totally agree with you. It's peer support groups are marvelous. Fantastic.
Yeah, they really are. When I was going to the clinic at the hospital, I didn't know anyone. And so whenever I would go in once a month, I believe it was, and I would see older people and they would always look at me and say, "Oh, you're so young to have kidney disease." And I got to a point where I thought I was the only young person. So I felt like in a room of all these older men and women, I was like, am I the only young person? And so I would talk to my nurse and say, where are all the young people? Like, I can't be the only one with kidney disease here. And she's like, oh, no, they're in a different clinic. So I always thought, why would you guys add me to the, older group? Of course I can get lots of information from them, but I always thought I was alone as a young person, but apparently I really wasn't. So yeah, and it was really good finding out about the Kidney Foundation, because the nurses and the doctors, like you said, Mason, they don't really tell you a lot. They only tell you about the medical side of it. So when I found the Kidney Foundation, I was very grateful to hear that there was more younger people that had the same disease. And I even ended up meeting people with lupus, and it brought me closer to a community.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys have good things to say about the foundation, and it all benefited you guys. That's perfect. So we're going to move on to our question number 2. Charlene, how have you managed day to day with hair loss? It's an emotional roller coaster and not fully understood as to why this happens and how it can be directly related to our kidney journey. So what's your thoughts?
I think born with chronic kidney disease, I usually expect when things happen, like I was told in the future your kidneys will fail. and there will be treatment options. But I think hair loss was this very sudden thing I did not expect. And when my hair started to fall at first, I did not know it was because of kidney disease. I knew it was correlated to it maybe. But when it first like fell off, I kind of panicked. I was just like, oh my God, what is happening? It is very scary to just see your own hair falling off like pieces and chunks. And it is quite, I'd say, a hard thing to go through. Just it is a process of accepting it that, oh, this is happening to me. And it's like another choice kind of taken from you. Like, I can cut my hair short, I can dye it, but right now I'm just losing it and it's not in my control, right? So I think as I lost it, it took a lot of time to reflect, to kind of process my emotions, and just let it out by just talking to people. I think really talking to my friends, talking to my parents, my mom especially, about what I'm going through with my hair loss. Another thing with my hair loss is that I try to keep a positive attitude with it. I know it's kind of hard in our long medical journeys to try and see like a positive side of things, but I think what came with, oh, I'm losing my hair, is that I'd never really get another opportunity to like have a really cool shaved head that is like looks very fashionable. I look like a model. And also, it's just a really refreshing process, really, to just grow your hair from shaved to long again, you know? And also, when you think of hair loss, you obviously think of, in terms of body image, it really does make me think of myself as being set apart in a crowd of people, because like everywhere you see is hair, right? And then when it comes to me, it's like, oh, no hair. So I think just that feeling of standing out sometimes can cause anxiety and can really impact how I see myself. But what I try to turn that into an opportunity is, if I have people's attention on me, then I should turn it into a positive thing. So I kind of redid my closet thanks to my parents' financial support. But I literally redid my closet and I wore just really fashionable outfits to be like, okay, if they're staring at my head, then they should, stare at the rest of my body and be like, oh, this girl has no hair, but this girl also has an amazing outfit. Yeah.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing all of that. Honestly, kudos to you. And for taking back that power, empowering yourself to change that narrative of talking about the hair. Instead, you're talking about the outfits. So good for you. That's amazing.
That's excellent. Fortunately, my hair didn't fall out like yours did, but I did notice that, when I was brushing my hair in the morning, that there was more strands in there than normal. And unfortunately, they weren't a lot of the gray ones, you know what I mean? And when I spoke to the nephrologist about this, I said, did you forget to tell me something about the fact that, I might lose some hair? He goes, oh, did I not mention that? Yeah, you kind of forgot that one, right? But it was just like, okay, so yeah, I'm losing my hair a little bit, but nothing drastic like you. And yeah, kudos to you for shaving it and going, let's make it like a bold statement and, own it. Fabulous idea. I'm proud of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Charlene, thank you for sharing that vulnerable story. My question's coming up. It's not about hair loss, but it's about something that's very visible on my skin. So when my question comes, but this is why peer support is so important, is to hear stories like you, and you turned, your issue around to make it so positive. So it just brings me warmth to my heart, and why peer support is the ultimate for all kidney patients. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Charlene, I know that we had spoken about the hair loss because I did lose my hair as well. It wasn't as much as, yours, where you had to shave it all off, but I did lose my hair. I had dreadlocks at the time back in 2013. And I just noticed that my dreadlocks were just thinning by the day. So I went to my hairdresser and I showed it to her. And she knew about my diagnosis as well. And she just said, let's just cut it all off. So the next day I went to school and the whole class just looked at me and they were just like, what happened to your hair? Because one day you go in with long hair, the next day you go in with a pixie cut, and they were just like, what happened? And I was just like, oh, I just decided to cut my hair off. And they were like, oh, okay, it looks nice. And you have, like Charlene said, you have to own it. And so that's what I did. And I always say it's just hair, it's going to grow back, and if it doesn't, oh well, you just have a bald head and you look good with it.
I was going to say how obviously it means a lot more to you as women, I would assume, for the hair loss piece compared to men. A lot of men experience that male pattern baldness, right? And so going through the kidney journey or kidney failure, I didn't even know about hair loss being a symptom, like Louise was saying, of doctors don't say that as a symptom. They talk about the swollen legs and all these other symptoms. They never mention hair loss. And I actually started to encounter some hair loss as well. Thankfully, it started to grow back a little bit, but this patch here, you might be able to see it a little bit, thinning anyways, starting to. And so eventually one day I just briefly mentioned it in a conversation with the doctor when they're like, did you experience any other symptoms? And I mentioned the hair loss and they said, oh, well, here, we'll add some vitamin D. And so thankfully I mentioned it to the doctor. So I think that was something that was worth mentioning. Even if you think it might just be due to something else, like just age and male pattern baldness of starting to lose your hair, it might actually be a symptom of something else. And the doctors might be able to prescribe vitamin D or something like that that might be able to help. Since starting the vitamin D, it's really started to help grow it in a little bit more. And so be honest with your doctors as far as any kind of symptoms that you guys experience. And know that it's not just a sex related thing of like, it could be male, it could be female. Everybody could struggle with hair loss. Everybody could struggle with any kind of symptom that you guys are going through.
And what one treatment works for one patient might not work for all. We also have to remember that. And
Exactly.
to Charlene's point of the hair loss, I know for me, when I had one of my transplants, I had a lot of hair gain. So there was that opposite where I gained a lot of hair, especially on the face. So that was kind of distressing when you're in your teens. But I know when I lost my transplant, like Charlene, I actually had bald patches, and it was really hard to kind of, emotionally go through those stages. And, when you're in whatever age you're in, going out in the public, you're always stressing, like, how do I cover it up? What hairstyle do I make so I cover up that spot? So it happens to more of our patients than we realize, because again, this isn't a common symptom that is talked about. But I guess just being open and honest with your medical team, connecting with other patients. I know I connected with so many that had hair loss, and like Charlene, empowering yourself and taking that control back. So this is why I color my hair, because now it's like, okay, it's falling out a little bit again, but let me have fun with it before it all plops out. So being open and honest with yourself too really helps you cope and get through the process. So Charlene, you're definitely not alone in that. And thank you again for being so open and forthcoming with your feelings about it. You have a lot of positive comments in the chats. Cheering you on.
Oh, thank
Rightfully
you guys. Thank you guys.
For sure. All right, so we're going to move on to our next question, which is for Louise and everyone as well. How has becoming a CKD patient affected your way of looking at life, with being more mindful with diet, exercise, and watching the consumption of everything, and water consumption?
One of the things that the doctor did for me is he limited my fluid intake to basically 1,500 milliliters, because one of my problems was I was drinking way too much. I mean, it was normal for me to have 2 cups of tea in the morning, have several bottles of water. I was probably drinking 3 to 4 liters of fluid a day. So to suddenly be limited was extremely difficult, and like I said, this was my doctor with me, because other people are going to get told to make sure they drink more water, to make sure they can flush the kidneys. Going grocery shopping has changed. I now look at the labels very, very carefully. And unfortunately, we can make mistakes when looking at labels and misread them. I do have to tell you that I was in the grocery store one day and I just wanted to treat myself because I was tired of having salads. And I picked up a box of scones and I read it and I said, oh, only 7% sodium. Excellent. So I got home and I had one and it was so good. I had another one. Oh my goodness, it was yummy, yummy. So then I had my supper and time flew by and I thought, no, I think I'll have another scone after supper. I went, gee, this one's awfully salty. And then I reread the label and found out it was 27% for each one instead of 7. Oh dear. And then you really kind of panic because, before this, the doctor had said to me, well, if you eat a big bag of chips, make sure you drink lots of water to flush the kidneys. Well, now you can't do that because you don't want to flush the kidneys because you don't want them to work overtime, right? So I was in a great big huge panic mode and just about ready to call the doctor's office when I kind of said, okay, let's just let the kidneys do what's happening and get rid of that other scone so you don't eat it. I marked it down as a question of what do I do when I do something stupid like that again? When I'm talking to my nephrologist. So I kept a book and I kept a list of all the questions that I had to ask him. And, when I did talk to him and he kind of goes, so what did you learn from that? Learn to read the labels better. If you need the magnifying glass, get the magnifying glass out, right? I mean, but now that I'm more conscious of that, I'm more conscious of what I eat. I'm more conscious of the exercise. You got it, Mason. Yep. Keep track. And I'm the type of person, I need to keep track of everything I eat. Otherwise, I will put the weight back on. And, it's a joke that I now weigh less than I do when I got divorced, which tells you how much weight I put on after the divorce. It's amazing when I stop and look at different things, how much I've changed because of this. When I go out to restaurants now, I look at the menu and I don't look at the menu as an absolute thing. I look at the menu as it being a suggestion of what is available to you. So if I want to change things, I don't hesitate to ask. Instead of having that, of course, we're not allowed pickles because of all the salt, but instead of having that pickle, can we get something else? Instead of that baked potato, could I get fresh vegetables? So that has really changed my method of eating out as well, because it just seemed to me before I would just take whatever was on the menu as, God's gospel truth. And that's what we were having in that meal. Whereas now I go, no, those are only suggestions. What else can I trade? What can I do with it? How can I change it to adapt for me? So that was some of the biggest things is getting out, walking more, exercising more, watching what I'm eating and talking to my friends and explaining why I don't go out to eat pizza every night. When I got the chance to order in a pizza, I got the small pizza and I enjoyed it. But then the next day I went, oh, that was really greasy. I didn't realize how much it was, right? Yep. So has anybody else kind of encountered the same thing when we're getting a food that we haven't had in a long time, we've looked forward to it? It's like,
Well, thanks for sharing, Louise. For me, having a transplant for 36 years, I didn't have to watch my diet. I can eat I ate everything. I drank like a fish. But then when my kidney failed and I had to go on dialysis, it was like a 360-degree turn. I can from drinking 5 liters of water to not even 1,000. So that was really difficult, but you just learn to cope and to, try to be healthy and different choices. So I can totally relate to you about the fluid intake. That's for sure.
I think it's really great to hear both perspectives of before and after transplant. Even going through this for 2 years, no doctor or no one in healthcare has ever talked about what life is really going to be like after transplant. So a lot of people might be going through those questions as well to say kind of, is life really going to go back to normal, or how careful do I have to be afterwards, right? But I also went through kind of that same issues with dietary, with food loss and things. Thankfully, I didn't have to experience fluid restrictions. I'm still peeing. So there are still some people who, even once they start dialysis, still do continue to pee. And it makes that whole dialysis process a lot better because they don't have to have the fluid taken off. And so they have a lot less side effects than other people do. So thankfully, I'm one of those few people, and I just remain focused on that. But another thing I wanted to mention was just how strange it is for people with kidney failure having these restrictions compared to other people with other food allergies. So for example, if you have a peanut allergy or strawberry allergy or gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance, any of those things, if you have some kind of food that you're not supposed to have, your body gives you those signs that you've messed up, you've done something wrong, and you feel it, right?
Yep.
But those of us with kidney failure, I don't know about you guys, but at least for myself, if I have a bunch of sodium, I don't feel it the next day. If I have a bunch of potassium, I don't feel it the next day. So it only showed up in my numbers, right? To say, oh, you're way too high. Like your potassium skyrocketed this month. And I'm like, I wonder why. Like, what did I do? Right? But I never had any sign that I was messing up other than the blood work. And so it's definitely a really different experience from other kind of food restrictions. And so when I kind of realized that, I just went into, again, kind of a paranoia, the same way that I was in isolation kind of paranoia. And so I ended up losing 50 pounds, going into like my underwear model weight from when I was 18. So that was actually a good thing. It was a nice benefit of it. Unfortunately, the social isolation, nobody was there to see it. But that was good. And you got to focus on the good pieces, right?
And to go back to your point, Mason, I'm the opposite, where I actually feel it if my potassium goes up or my phosphate goes up. Because I'm a long-term patient, I know my body, and I can feel those things. And even with the weight gain or weight loss, a lot of people don't realize that for our kind of community, that sometimes weight gain is actually a good thing, and the weight loss is a negative thing, depending on the journey that we're in and the stages we're in with the kidney. So it's explaining that to people, and having those comments that, oh, you've lost weight, you look so good, but it's the opposite for me because I'm in pain and it's not a good thing I'm losing the weight. So for you, it was great that you lost the weight, but it took a toll on you, right? So socially, mentally, and so it's explaining those things to individuals sometimes gets a bit tricky, but our voice is our power, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, I can totally relate to you there, Sadia. I was always a thin person all my life, but when I had my transplant, it was the heaviest ever. You know, like certain places I didn't want, like my love handles, my stomach, my breast. But when I was on dialysis, I lost so much weight because I was paranoid, you know, like, oh, I can't eat this. I can't eat, like my diet totally changed like 360 degrees. So, it was really hard. And it was the most difficult going to like potlucks, seeing all that food that I can't eat. And, you know, going out with my friends, like, oh, I can't eat that French fries anymore. So that was really difficult for me. But in time, I thank God I have a wonderful husband that is a great chef, and he incorporated my diet, that I can eat all these things. And it's just a way of living and trying to adjust. And to me, it's to be as healthy as I can for my next transplant. So that was my goal. And that's how I coped.
And then having other health complications like lupus, like diabetes, where the diet is kind of contradicting to the kidney diet, kind of makes that a bit more difficult. But, one really good resource that we have is Kidney Community Kitchen. Really great with amazing dietitian support, recipes. So there are supports there. It's just how you incorporate that into your diet and how you open up to your renal dietitian who can actually help you create those meal plans and tell you exactly how much to eat. And, we have those resources with our amazing renal teams. It's just knowing how to access them and how to navigate them. So, Louise, I know you wanted to add to that comment.
I was just going to say that with respect to what you said about people gaining weight and people losing weight, I mean, if somebody is already very slim, they don't need to lose any more weight. And, if you were to look at like somebody like Charlene here, who is very slender and tiny, for her to lose more weight would be astronomically bad, right? I mean, but it always depends on who we are and where we are in the journey. Is it okay for us to lose weight, or do we need to gain weight? And talking about the different foods we're allowed to have. And, by the way, what time is supper, Salvador? Because I'm coming to your place.
Sure, come on over.
Somebody to cook for me. Woohoo. But
it is good.
Like I said, when you go out for supper, I mean, I was out recently and we went to a Greek restaurant, and I thoroughly expected to find something there. And the guy said, well, there's not a lot here without salt. And I kind of went, okay, so I guess I'm having a hamburger. And then he went, well, I'll get fries with that, but no salt on the fries. And then you get there and it's like, okay, do you eat the hamburger with the bun, or do you have the fries? I wanted the fries more than I wanted the bun. So guess what? But that's how I said it was okay. I had the meat and all the lettuce and all those goody things. And then I ate, maybe quarter to half of the fries, and I was happy. So, it's just a compromise of what we're doing and how we're coping with things. So,
and even with that, our side effects, like for transplant, for example, moon face. Oh, that was pretty bad. When
I had that.
Yeah. And
yeah, I had moon face too.
Yeah,
Me too.
that's a side effect that I know it's really difficult to go through when you have your transplant. And I know people didn't recognize me until I spoke, and then they realized, oh, it's Sadia, because they didn't recognize me because my moon face was that big. So yeah, kind of hard. But Charlene, I see you don't have it, so that's actually really good. And again, every patient's very unique and different in terms of how they have side effects, what they go through. So there you go. Great. Now, moving on to our next question, Mason. How did you, and before that, if you guys have more, our participants, please add your questions to the Q&A. I see already there's quite a few in there, and we'll get to them in a little bit. So how did you ultimately decide as a young professional which method of dialysis you wanted to go on with respect to your other health concerns and the type of access you wanted for dialysis? And this is all considering that you're in your early 30s.
Yeah, so I got diagnosed when I was 28. I went through school for like 9 years, so it took me a while, but I went through the process in my first year of teaching. And when I got diagnosed, it was just that first summer, first year after teaching. And I was told, okay, well, you have kidney failure and you have to choose between the three options. You've got PD, you've got central line, or you've got a fistula. I knew nothing about any of these options. Like, I knew nothing about kidney failure. I knew the term dialysis, but I knew nothing else, right? And so then it was looking into, okay, well, what are the restrictions for each one of these things? Because I definitely know I do not want a tube sticking out of my body. I'm 28 years old. I want to be able to go to the beach still and not feel like anybody's going to be looking at me because of a tube, right? But I also didn't want to have the surgery because I had a fear of needles. Like, I would even pass out sometimes from needles. So I didn't want to do the fistula either and have to do needles 3 times a week. But I realized that throughout the CKD process, I would be having to do a lot of blood work, and I would have to get over that fear of needles. And so it all came down to the restrictions. And so I was looking at food restrictions to say, well, which one allows me to eat more, PD or chemo? And then it was activity restrictions. So like showering. I've talked to other people now since then who have the central line, and they hate it. They can't wait to get a fistula now that they've been doing the central line for a while, because like the showering aspect and how they can't go swimming in a lot of different, or I think any aspect for, I don't know. I don't know that much about central line. But I know that there's a lot of restrictions for central line, a little bit less for PD, I believe, but still a lot less for people with a fistula. Like I could still go swimming in a lake if I wanted to go visit my parents. Unfortunately now, because COVID, I've been told that I can't go up north to go visit my parents. They won't accept me as a traveling dialysis patient, which is a little bit frustrating. But I'm very happy with the decision that I made to go with a fistula. And since then, I just started, or I waited until I was actually getting symptoms to be able to start dialysis. Unfortunately, those symptoms never actually came, which is good a thing, but also bad. And so I started dialysis this year in January. And in February, I got transferred over to the home hemo program, which was also fantastic. Unfortunately, I didn't finish the program for some other reasons, which is a much longer story. But one of the good things that came out of it was that I actually learned to do my own needles. So I've now in 2 years gone from such a fear of needles that I was passing out from just simple blood work or simple IV to now I'm doing my own needles with like the giant 15 gauge needles. And all the nurses over at the hospital, every time they see me, they're like, I can't imagine how you are doing this. I couldn't even do this. I do needles for my profession, right? And so not only that, but now I'm actually doing dull needles because of it. And so a technique called buttonhole, where I pick off the scab and then the needle just slides in, even though it's a dull needle. So there's no sharpness, no pricks. It's the best experience I could possibly ask for doing dialysis, I think.
I agree with you. I do buttonhole as well. And taking that charge back and doing it for yourself, it makes a huge, huge difference for your own care. And working as a team with your medical team. That's like straightforward. It works. Anyone else have insight on that topic?
I don't remember exactly. So I was on PD and I don't remember exactly how it was chosen. I think it was just chosen for me. And I'm very happy that it was chosen for me due to the fact that I was in school and then I was working as well. So it was great because I could bring it to wherever I was going. And I'm sorry to hear that you can't travel, Mason, but I was able to travel with mine. I went to Africa for a month. So I was able to, what we did was we shipped my equipment over, and it got there about a month before we got there. And so my aunt put it in a safe place for me. When I got there, I just inspected everything to make sure it wasn't cloudy. Sorry, before we got there, she sent me videos and stuff like that just to make sure it wasn't cloudy and there was nothing wrong with them. But on my way there, I took a few bags as well, just in case, and everything turned out great. So, yeah.
And that's the flexibility of dialysis, that regardless of which one you do choose, you can travel with it safely and effectively. And with PD, we have patients that go camping. We have patients that go fishing. We have all kinds of patients that take their PD and they go wherever they need to and do their dialysis, which is amazing. And that's, again, taking lead so that you're controlling the narrative and not letting basically the treatment control you, which is really good. Yeah, very good. Any other insights from any of our panelists?
So for me, when I first was on dialysis as a kid, for the health professional said to me that hemodialysis was the best way to go. So I had a fistula back then. But it's now the second time around being on dialysis, I got a fistula. But for some reason, my body, I have like amazing veins, and my fistula got way too big. that it was eventually going to harm my heart. So last year, it was removed totally because it was like a snake in my arm. It was massive.
Oh, wow.
I was regarding the buttonhole. It's great that Saudi you can do it and Mason can do it, but they discourage that at TGH. So I don't know. Each healthcare unit is different. Now I'm doing home dialysis and I have a catheter, and let me tell you, I love it. If I knew what I know now of a catheter, I would have never gotten the fish lab. That's just me. Everybody's different. Yeah, I can shower with it actually. There's now protection. Like, it's come a long way. Swimming, I've never really was a swimmer to begin with, so it didn't really affected me. So I still go places with the catheter. Just like Sadia says, you have to try to cope with it and not make it control you and live your life to the fullest. Don't let dialysis control your life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Um,
About the
you brought up-
swimming aspect, I didn't go swimming for years. Like since my PD insertion in 2013, sorry, in 2013, yeah. I went swimming for the first time this year, and it was strange. I was nervous, but it was good. It was really good.
Yeah, some patients actually get those ostomy bags, and they put it over either their central line or their PD catheter in order to, and I see somebody, one of our participants just put that in the chats. So that is one way to go ahead and still enjoy. But again, consult with your renal team, make sure it's safe for you. But each access for dialysis, each type of dialysis works different for every single patient. So what might work for you might not work for someone else. And then again, you try it, it doesn't work. You can always switch to a different modality as long as it works with you and the team and their space. There's a whole shebang of things, but yeah, this is why we have so many different kinds, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
One of the things that you had mentioned was how it looks. And so for anybody kind of considering those decisions, any of the viewers, I just thought I might show it if it would show up. It's really not that bad.
No, it's really good.
Like, it varies based on your surgery. Some of them can turn out really, really bumpy, not too shocking. So if you are considering it, look up different pictures, ask different groups to see if people are comfortable showing you. Maybe see your local dialysis unit, if you're welcome there to kind of visit to see, it might be able to be arranged with your doctor, things like that.
One thing I would suggest, don't Google, because there's a lot of unfortunate images. So, but like Mason said, talk to your renal team. That is the best individuals you can talk to see if you can see it live from another patient that gives consent. And that's actually going to lead into my second question. As a young adult who is single and in the dating scene, Mason, there is fear of kidney disease being a red flag to others for dating. Someone who is chronically ill, or even, starting a family, considering genetics and everything. So how did you and how have you approached this when you have gone on dates, even for those folks, whoever has a partner, et cetera, how do you guys cope with that?
Yeah, so I've been doing online dating even for the past 10 years, because you never know where you might meet the right person. But I've kind of struggled with that piece of how to deal with the health issues my entire life because of going blind at 18. So I always had that question to deal with of saying, well, when do I mention the vision loss? Like, most people can't see it. So unless I mention it, they won't know. But then when I do mention it, sometimes people just ghost me all of a sudden after they know that I'm blind. Now that I've become accustomed to the vision loss, well, now I have kidney failure, and it's kind of that same process started all over again. And so I have typically just kept it to myself until I meet someone. But there's also now this giant scar on my arm and this bump on my arm, right? And so I don't want it to be a shock when they first meet me either, to be like, what the hell is that? And so it's kind of finding that right balance. And so I specifically remember when I went on my first date afterwards, because I got this surgery back in August 2020. And I don't know how long, it might have been close to a year that I didn't even see anybody. Like, I was living in my apartment in just complete isolation. My parents came to stay with me to help me after the surgery, but I wasn't seeing people. And so eventually, about a year later, I ended up going on one of my first dates. And I was freaking out. It was nice weather outside, and I had no idea what to wear because it was shorts weather. And so I was wearing like shorts, but then I couldn't wear a t-shirt because it had the scar and the bump and everything showing. And I thought, I don't want her to know right away. I want to be able to kind of veer into this once I know she's comfortable, right? Like, and in the right spot in the conversation. And so I ended up wearing a dress shirt so that I had long sleeves, but then with shorts. And so when I showed up, we actually joked about it to be like, what are you doing? Like, you're wearing, I'm so confused. You're so dress shirt and casual. This is so throwing me off. And so then I was like, okay, well, this is the reason why I'm actually going through kidney failure. About a year ago, I got this surgery, and this is my first date since. And so I wasn't sure how you would feel about seeing this. And so then I rolled up the sleeve to show her the scars, and she didn't have an issue with it whatsoever. Because of this meeting, I was told about how different topics and things that we would want to cover. And so I actually reached out to all of the people who I've gone on dates with over the past 2 years, to ask them specifically of saying, hey, I am doing this presentation for everybody who has these body images, image issues, and who might be dating, things like that. And I wanted to ask your opinion. Hopefully you can be honest with me. How did it make you feel that I was going through kidney failure, that I had the scars, that I had that fistula that had that buzz on it, where maybe you would feel that thrill if you were to touch it, or if it was to touch you, and how did it make you feel, right? And so I asked everybody who I've been on a date with.
Wow.
And every single person, not a single person had a problem with it. Some people even since then have now deleted me for different reasons, and they still didn't correct me to be like, yeah, and that was a terrible experience. They were all perfectly supportive of it. Some people actually even said that they were more interested because of it, where it was a great icebreaker to say it's not just the typical conversation that you would have on a date of talking about what's your favorite color and how's the weather and what's your favorite band and what kind of music do you like and all the stereotypical boring stuff on a date that everybody always goes through. This was kind of a conversation that they've never experienced before, right? One thing for anybody who does a lot of dating, you may know, like, that first contact is kind of a big icebreaker piece, right? And so that's a great way also to kind of break the ice there of being like, well, I've got this fistula, this surgery, and if you want, you can feel what it feels like of this bump or feel this thrill. And that kind of breaks that touch barrier of a first touch thing. And so you can turn it into a positive, right? And that's what I've learned probably as the most important lesson throughout my life, going through the kidney failure, going through the vision loss, all the different things, is to just really stay focused on the positive aspects of life. Stay focused to the things that you can control, like we were just talking about with the different access. You get to control, you get to choose as to what kind of access you want. You get to choose if you want to do a transplant or not. All of these things you get to choose, and the things that you don't, they're outside of your control, and you need to learn to accept the things that you can't control and focus on the positive aspects.
Very well said. So
Totally.
we only have time for one more question, and then we have a lot of Q&A questions. So Sal, I'm gonna move it on to you for our final question, or topic is, as a kidney patient and being on immune suppressed medications for years, do you have any issues with skin conditions, such as typical multiple moles, bumps, types of skin cancer, and how does that affect your life going forward?
Yeah, so for me, before I had my first my only transplant, I never had any skin. My skin was amazing. But then with immune suppressant drugs, and I've been on Imuran and prednisone for 36 years when I had my transplant, and I developed lot of warts and a lot of moles on my body. And I have to be honest, it really, being a younger man, it really affected me. And going back to what Mason's saying about the fistula and dating, you know, like it did affect like some of the people that I was dating, like, what is that? Like, what's going on there? But then I met, you know, amazing man, and now he's my husband. And even he was honest. He goes, when I saw those bumps, I was kind of concerned, but because he got to know me, and that's what I want to say to people. Like, and Mason, that's great that he had some great experiences dating. Is it shows who you are as a person, and even though you have these bumps or these moles, and at times I had skin cancers that I removed, it doesn't define who you are. And whoever you meet in life you want to be your life partner, they have to accept who you are. And the way I coped with these bumps is either I have these bumps or not have my transplant, because I have to take the immune suppressant medication. So that's how I coped. It is hard at times still, because I still have them, but if I have to choose, I want to have a transplant and get off dialysis. So that's the way I think.
Yeah. And unfortunately, kidney disease, kidney failure, it's not visible in terms of what we're going through. We hide a lot of the stuff ourselves, like our fatigue, we can easily hide. Some of the chronic pain we can easily hide. But having visible aspects of it, side effects, is hard. And for us as individuals, like, we want to make sure that we're okay inside and out. And stretch marks, the hair loss, the weight gain, everything we've talked about, those are things that we can kind of control, but then not, like, cover up in certain ways, shave our head. But at the end of the day, something like what you're going through, Sal, is very topical. And it is you taking that charge back and taking your life back at the end of the day. So again, kudos to you too on that. That's awesome.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
So we're going to Wendy's question, and then we'll go to the Q&A because I think we have time. So Wendy and everyone else, when diagnosed for you specifically at 26 with kidney failure and then lupus nephritis, and you're put on heavy doses of prednisone, how did that affect your body? And this could go to Charlene, it could go to Sal.
So initially, when I was put on prednisone, my doctor prescribed me with the really high dose, 80 milligrams. And one of the things that he told me was that be really careful with prednisone because you'll gain weight. At the time, I was 120 pounds, so I was very thin. So I was just like, I eat a lot of food anyways, and I never gain weight, so I'm not going to worry about it. Within 3 months, I gained 50 pounds, and the weight just literally crept up on me. So being that small and gaining 50 pounds in such a short period of time, I did end up getting a lot of stretch marks all over my body. And it was very hard for me at the beginning because, I can't go to the beach in a bikini anymore. I have to wear a one piece now. I can't wear tops that show my stomach, so I have to wear everything that's long sleeves or down to, at least my waist. One of the things that I really hated was that I got stretch marks on my feet as well. So whenever I would wear sandals or anything that was open face, you can see stretch marks. And people would always look at me and be like, what is that? And then I'd have to explain to them what it was. Even at times people would ask me, oh, you have kids, because of the stretch marks on my body. And I'd have to say, no, at that time I didn't have kids. So I was like, no, it's just stretch marks. And, I would just leave it at that. I wouldn't want to explain myself. So it was really hard in that aspect. But then I ended up losing the weight, but then of course the stretch marks stayed. They were really embedded in my body to the point where, I don't know if any of you guys have stretch marks, but the deeper they are, the more darker they get. at least for my skin tone. So it was really bad. And also with Sal, talking about those marks and the warts and stuff that you have, I actually ended up getting some dark spots all over my, like from my waist up to my head, just dark black spots all over. And that was really hard for me as well. So it's been a long journey. At the time, it just felt like once one thing was done, another thing would happen, and it would just be like a rolling roller coaster. And so at one point I would just sit there and cry and just be like, why me? Why is this happening to me? When is it going to be over? I can't take anymore. And, you know, sometimes I would literally turn off my phone and just sit at home and just like watch TV in my comfort zone and just not talk to anybody because I was just really down. Yeah.
And it's okay to have those emotions too. Those days where you are feeling down, where you're angry, because again, none of us expected this to happen. But it's how you take those emotions and honestly do turn them into a positive experience and a learning experience, and then give back to others like this who could benefit from what you learned and what you kind of went through. So yeah, I feel your struggle, Wendy, with the stretch marks. I have them everywhere as well. And getting them as a young adult, it's hard. I feel you. All right. Any other comments towards this before we move on to our Q&A? All right. So we actually have a lot of good Q&A questions, and keep bringing them forward. I do apologize if you don't get through all of them, but you're always welcome to email at kidneyprograms@kidney.ca to ask more questions from our panelists. And just an FYI, this is kind of what our support groups environments look like virtually. So if you ever wanted to join one of our virtual support groups, this is kind of how the vibe is. And a great way to bring up these topics. We do talk about this stuff in an open format and confidential. It's safe. So definitely check that out on our website, kidney.ca. And let's go on to one of our first questions. So one question is, as a social worker working in a clinic, I have addressed some of these issues with patients to give patients a sense of what may happen, and in doing so, scared someone. One person said, now I have one more thing to worry about. Any suggestions on how to approach this without causing this extra stress?
Yeah, so I'll jump in with this. I actually had a lot of frustrations with social workers for the opposite reason, because they would not want to talk about anything that was going to be coming up or anything that was going to be happening. Same thing with the doctors. Like, it was mainly all kind of put on me to do my own research. And then if I had any issues, then I could talk about how I was feeling with it. But they didn't want to scare me about all the things. And I was coming from the other perspective saying, I want to be scared. Like, I want to know all the risks that are involved. I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know what to look out for, not just the basic symptoms of knowing when I need to start dialysis, but everything else as well. And it was very, very frustrating because no one in healthcare would tell me the answers that I was wanting. And especially with social workers, I had a lot of issues with that, where every time it kind of just felt like they were just active listening only and not actually really caring or anything like that.
So with that, Mason, what advice would you give to the social workers to kind of support that narrative then?
Give them the option. So kind of ask, there's typically 2 different methods or 3 different ways how people could potentially react, although there is a lot of different ways that people react. How much information would you like? Would you like the high amount of information that may scare you, or would you like me to tell you just the basic information? And kind of give it to the patient to let them decide as to how much they want to know.
Yeah. Yep, Louise?
I also just want to say that if, you know, this social worker is talking to somebody who is, you know, being worried about this, the social worker can also suggest contacting the Kidney Foundation and saying, you know, they do have a one-on-one support available for people. If you just want to talk to somebody who's been in your shoes, to give them a sense and an idea of what it actually is going on, you know, whether we're at the beginning of our kidney journey or, you know, on dialysis and awaiting a transplant. So the options are there if you know, people want them. So.
And this social worker does. I just will say that.
Okay.
Charlene, do you have any insight on this? Like how would you, when you were first diagnosed, how would you want that kind of information? Anyone else have anything to add to this question?
Fortunately, I had a great social worker. And so the best way that I looked at it was that I always came to the table with an open mind, whether it be good news or bad news. I always had an open mind about stuff. Sometimes what I would do is beforehand, I would always Google stuff. I know that's the worst thing to do, but I would always Google stuff just to see what the possibilities could be about what they might tell me if they say, oh, you have to do this or that, and just kind of like leave with it. Either if I'm happy or sad, I would go home and kind of just like ponder over it and try not to really let it affect me as much. So I don't know if that was a good suggestion, but that's how I took it.
No,
Just to continue on with your suggestion, Wendy, I mean, if people want to, I don't say Dr. Google's the best, but I always say that if you want to research, get online and do some research, but with some reputable clinics like the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, or some of our hospitals here in Canada are good sources of information as well. But what I always did was, when they gave me the information, I would do some research. And then I had the necessary information to ask intelligent questions of the renal team so that, I knew what to expect. So anyway, that's just kind of in addition to.
And it's hard knowing what are the right questions, what questions should you ask.
Exactly.
So, talking to your peers, they can give you that insight, like, oh, ask this or ask this, and then help you navigate that. So we have a few more questions, so I'm just going to move on. Someone asked, are there therapists or specialties in counseling who can provide support for people with chronic diseases? They found that speaking with their current therapist, that she does not know much or doesn't offer in terms of new diagnosis. So do any of you guys have experience with working with a therapist, a counselor, even like directly with a social worker to help you cope with what you're going through?
I know at one point, so when I was on the prednisone and they were weaning me off, I know like it really makes you down if they wean you off too fast. So I did see like a therapist, I think twice. And that was literally, I spoke to them, that was it. And I never went back. So it did help a bit, but obviously not enough for me to keep going back. So
yeah. And even if you connect with your social workers and they could send you to a therapist or a counselor who understands a chronic condition, if they have those resources, then that might kind of navigate the question a little bit better, or your concerns a little bit better. But again, if the person you're seeing doesn't have that experience or that knowledge, it becomes a bit of a difficult kind of therapy session. Okay, so we have a question for Mason. Someone is another participant who's joining us is a teacher as well, and are asking, are you open with your students, families, and colleagues about your journey?
Yes, 100%. I've found that for classroom management, it really, really helps to be open with the students about everything. I didn't really have much to say previously to getting diagnosed. And then because it ended up getting diagnosed at the exact same time as COVID, I actually didn't really get that experience in the classroom until just this fall. But when I was working this fall, it was in a workplace level class. For those of you who are not teachers, it's like the lowest level academically, where you have the most classroom management issues and behavioral issues. Typically at this school, like kids would be taking off their masks and not caring at all about COVID. And because I was open with them to say, hey, this is the reason why I'm wearing a special mask at the N95, and this is the reason why the scar, and like I told them all about any kind of questions they may have had, explain what dialysis is. They all in my classroom, every time they would wash their hands with a hand sanitizer, which they wouldn't do in any other classroom. They would keep their masks on. There was one guy who all of a sudden, he went from the worst following COVID rules person in the school to now asking actually to have like his own box of masks because of me kind of just explaining the whole situation and how it affects other people who he may not even be able to see how much it affects those other people.
Yeah. And then I'm going to throw it back to Charlene also, now that we have you. What about yourself? How have you been able to tell your friends, your peers, your family members about you going through your journey?
I think my family members, well, since I was born with chronic kidney disease, they knew from the start. But it was a bit more of a process with my friends of what I chose to share, and especially just the line between like your close friends and like just people you know at school and stuff like that. I think telling my close friends was actually one of the parts I was most nervous about, but also the easiest parts because I knew that they wouldn't judge me because of how they are. They're just so supportive. And when I told them about, hey, I have kidney disease, I need a kidney transplant, I have to take meds at 8 and 8, it was actually really liberating to be able to share with them this very other side of my life that I don't normally show a lot to other people. And just, I think just having people there to talk to kind of just say, hey, I have this, and them saying, okay, how can I help you? Do you want to talk about it? And stuff like that. It's just very supporting. It's very comforting. Yeah.
That is awesome. I'm glad that you have that support system. Yeah, real quick, Mason.
Yeah, real quick, just to add one more thing of a worry that I had that the other teacher might be going through of how admin is going to look at it from you being having kidney failure. My admin has actually been some of the most supportive people in my life for the past year going through this. And if you have any other questions, reach out and we can connect in some way, I'm sure, eventually, and I can answer more questions moving forward with the professional piece.
Awesome. All right. Moving on, we have 3 minutes, so moving on before we're done. Would like to know how the panelists handle scars, stretch marks from surgeries, and the meds. So I know we did touch on that, but that's again something that doesn't go away. It's there for life, especially the stretch marks. Anyone just give a quick tip on how you cope with it, how you faced it?
I can speak on that. So I've had 2 total hip replacements. And then I've had my transplant. So scars are my life now. So at first it was daunting because, coming from having, I don't want to use the word perfect, but coming from having a clean slate to having yourself cut, pried, all kinds of stuff, it was hard. But now, anytime I have to get a new surgery, I look at it as, it's a new piece of art on my body. I have tattoos, so I look at it as a new tattoo. So that's how I look at it, and that's how I make myself feel better about all the scars that I have. And it's a great, talking piece.
Yeah. And just remembering that people are going to stare at you regardless. So let them stare at your scars, right?
Exactly, yeah.
All right. We have one more question, and this is for the ladies and our panelists. And I guess, Wendy, since you've gone through this, have any women on the panel struggled with fertility due to CKD?
I'm past that age.
Wendy?
I have not. For the longest time, I thought I couldn't have kids, but I actually met my husband almost 4 years ago, and now we have a 10-month-old baby girl. So,
and you had that, to clarify, after transplant?
Yes, after transplant, yes. And my pregnancy was great, no complications. I did switch a few medications over, and I didn't have any problems. Everything went well.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more. Is there anyone reaching a point of throwing the diet out the window? I am really struggling and wanting sweets And no matter how much I eat, I'm always hungry. I have to cut out all the meats but chicken and turkey.
The tough one.
I can definitely address that one. I'm a huge sweet eater, and I'm also a big cauliflower eater. So I try and substitute cauliflower for chocolate. I will admit it doesn't always work, but it's kind of like it's the best I can do. But I do keep chocolate in the fridge, and I indulge every once in a while.
All right.
Yeah.
I thankfully with the diet, I have super paranoia. I monitor every single number of everything that I eat. I've even created a Google spreadsheet that you enter in one number of how much you eat, and it does all the totals for everything. But I will say for candy and your sweet tooth, gummy candy is the way to go. There's 1, 2.
That's a large bags of gummy.
It is. Oh my God.
There's 4, and I just finished off another one. And each one of these is like 2.5 kilograms. So if you are looking to get gummy candy, again, I'm not advertising anything here. I'm not paid sponsor or anything, but a store called the Wholesale Club, they sell giant bags of candy, like 2.5 kilograms, and only for like $10 each. Like, it's a great value. That's where corner stores go to restock. And so gummy candy is good for us to eat, I've been told by the dietitians.
Yes.
And that's probably the best price that you're ever going to find is at that store.
All right, perfect. Before we end off with you guys, any last quick tip, tool?
I would just say to everyone, we all are different. We just embrace your life. Live life to the fullest. Don't let whatever dialysis or whatever stage you're in, just, be yourself and be strong. And always remember that you're not alone. You can always come to any peer support that the Kidney Foundation offers. And we're all here. We all can relate. And again, we're not alone. And more power to everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Guys. So we're just going to go back to Craig. And thank you to our panelists. Go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Sadia. What an amazing session. I want to say that the Kidney Foundation is committed to providing information and educational resources about the kidneys and kidney disease. We invite you to visit the Kidney Community Kitchen. You heard it mentioned. Please go explore it. Just search Kidney Community Kitchen. You'll find recipes, information, and tools to help you manage your renal diet with or without gummy candies. Through our many regional branch offices, coast to coast, we offer advice and support about accessing services within the healthcare system. We offer help assisting people to access other supports in their community, and we help build skills for self-advocacy. I invite you, connect with us if you have any more questions, to speak with someone in your community or to access further educational materials and resources. If you would like to speak with a trained peer support volunteer through the Kidney Foundation, please email kidneyprograms@kidney.ca. I'll put this in the chat, or call 1-866-390-PEER, PEER. That's 1-866-390-7337. And that will connect you with a program's coordinator who can arrange further support. You can also join, as Sadia said, any of our virtual peer support groups. They're open to everyone coast to coast. This will connect you with groups of patients, caregivers, and living donors at www.kidney.ca. Sadia, back to you.
When the webinar has ended, we do encourage you guys, your computer will open to a new page requesting that you complete our webinar satisfaction survey. You will also receive a follow-up email that includes a link to the survey if you would like to complete it later. Your feedback is really important because we want this to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing series webinar. So your feedback, please provide it. Let us know how we did. And on behalf of the Kidney Foundation and our amazing patient partners, we thank all of you for taking the time for joining us today and for having this open, honest discussion when it comes to our body image, staying positive, and our self-esteem. So thank you, everyone, and have a great and safe rest of the day.